Hi, everyone. It is May 27. Can you believe it? We're at the end of the month and we're almost halfway through 2021. And we're all doing fine. We're thriving, hopefully, and we're bracing for the next onslaught. And we're a little smarter and a lot tougher this time. We're going to be very, very difficult opponent indeed for these criminal miscreants. Now, on a more light note, I'm happy to see that Mom with Bulldogs is here in the chat. And I will tell you, I will reassure you, I know there was some concern that I would find some untoward, let's put it, information on our friend, Mr. Fred Rogers. And I'm happy to report that I could find absolutely no smut on Mr. Rogers. That doesn't mean that someone in the future might not come up with something. I'll be as disappointed as you are, and most of America, and everybody else who has fond memories of Fred Rogers. I myself was not I'm not a graduate of Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. I think I was too old by that time. His particular target audience were preschoolers, let's say 3, 4, all the way up to about age 8. And this is what from I've read. There's plenty of articles on not just journalism, but serious academic study, scholarship on Fred Rogers. Most of it quite flattering. And I will be critical of his contribution, none of which he might have really played a direct role in. But I think he was put in that particular situation not by accident. These, there's millions of dollars as well as the fate of a whole generation, 2 or 3 or 4 generations of American children that are at stake. I don't know if this show was exported overseas. It's very America culture specific, but I don't know how well it translates. So rest assured, you're going to leave here with this program from this program with a slightly different look at Mr. Rogers, but nothing sleazy that I uncovered in the case of our friend Tony Bowe, Anthony Bourdain, as you know. Well, I won't go through it, but I broke through that little barrier there, as I had been hoping to do. And I also made some interesting discoveries about the family, the bloodlines behind the beloved comedian Joan Rivers. Nothing so much on Johnny Carson. You notice there's a sort of a celebrity motif going on here. And that's because not only are they, for me, inherently interesting, but as I've said before, my whole focus has been media and popular culture professionally, because I recognized early on that this is how the society and our culture, for better or worse, this is how we understand reality with a capital R. Fabricated though it may be, artificial as it may be, some of it peeks through, and there's some genuine humanity in a lot of, including Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, and even in this documentary on Paris Hilton, I found it very convincing. Maybe I'm being played again. I knew that was being played when we were watching The Simple Life, and I knew that her persona was fabricated. Apparently, a lot of girls, that is pre-teeners or tweeners in particular, took her as being the genuine article. I always give people too much credit, no matter how old they are. I thought they could figure that out, but nonetheless, we'll be extending that series of insights that I came away with thanks to Paris Hilton, as I like to call her. But first, a couple of announcements. We will have, this is for Patreon people, and I encourage you to support this program, my efforts, and our colleagues here by joining the Patreon, my Patreon. And those of you who are longstanding members, like Tyrone Sargent, I see you're here. and others. I'm not going to go through the whole honor roll here. You know that I have a monthly office hours session, and this one comes up this coming Wednesday, June 2nd, and it's 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Hope to see you all there. I have a Zoom set up. I think I finally got it worked out, so everybody's going to be able to get some time on it. Will be instead of StreamYard, I think I'm limited to 6 or 8, something like that. But everybody can come in. You don't have to stay all through the whole session. It usually runs for about 90 minutes. I like to run it for about an hour and a half. And you can come in late, of course. And I will also tell you that for those of you who can't make it, I will post that session next Wednesday onto YouTube for later viewing. That is for people who cannot attend the live session. And I think it's going to have to go on. I think I'm still going to be in the doghouse as far as YouTube's concerned. So it might be on this channel. I have the couple channels here, and most of you know that I've been suspended for 2 weeks. I think I have another week to go, something like that, a week and a half, something like that. So also tonight, I'll remind you. Most of you know, but I'll remind you. I'll be at my favorite show with John O'Loughlin and the great George Webb at the Thursday Trio tonight, 8 o'clock Eastern and 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Now, I have been getting individual questions, and I appreciate them. I appreciate the comments that people make as well. And I can't answer all the questions individually, so I've been trying to figure out a creative workaround so that we can have better communications, because believe me, I mean, as nice as the live chat is and the comments, I can't follow them as I'm trying to present something as well. And I'd also like to be able to see you and interact on camera, let's say in a Zoom session or StreamYard. And StreamYard will allow, I think, 6 people on, including me, I think, at the same time. So I invite all of you here, because I know a lot of you are regulars. Most of you are regulars. Tyrone Sargent, Corky Goss, Mom with Bulldogs, and Robert Kovacs, and Nadia Martinez. All of you. Piper Vogel. Yeah, I'm glad to see you're here, Piper, because I think you might be interested in particular with in this book by Caitlin Rother, I'll Take Care of You, since you're interested in the female Illuminati, female secret society. I alluded to that either last talk or before, and I'm more interested in American sororities, college affiliated sororities. Now, they might have that long-standing occultic background that someone like Cesarian, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, that's a little bit too global and broad for my taste. I want to dig into the primarily historically Black colleges. Their sororities are very, very powerful. Not very many people have looked into it, and also the sororities in general. And indeed, they might go back to Babylon for all we know. But anyway, I'm inviting Piper Vogel and Robert Kovacs and Tyrone and Corky to pick up this book, or I can, it's probably better if you get it, because it's a hefty, 500, 400 pages. Yeah, 300 something, but it's a real page turner, right? And this will help us. And I'm going to see, here's the deal. We're going to all read this book, and this will have to happen a couple of weeks from now, because I'm still in the doghouse with YouTube. So once I get that channel back on there, we'll do a live stream like this. And then, like I did with my friend Howard Wilson a couple of weeks ago, I'll bring you into the studio, individually and collectively, and we'll go back and we'll talk, and we'll have a whole show on this particular book, because it's fascinating. It's true crime. And those of you who watch this stream regularly know that I'm in the process of developing a true crime podcast. This is true crime. And it's going to have a certain, I'm not going to give it away now, but it's going to have a certain distinctive approach, my podcast, that's going to separate it from all the other podcasts that are out there. Some of them are quite good. Most of them are pretty mediocre. But I'm going to aim for that 500,000 mark of an audience. Podcasts are a lot more amenable to that as opposed to a YouTube or some other, because people can listen to it while they're traveling or driving around or around the house. So I'm going to shoot for that mark, 500,000. And I have an expert professional help on this, by the way, that are working with me on this. And I'm also watching all the tutorials. And earlier today, I was watching a 4-day seminar. It's free, dealing with music primarily and how to use social media effectively and develop courses. So I'm trying to hit that 500,000 to 750,000 because that's where I need to be. My material, as I told you, is of that caliber. It's professional caliber. And hopefully, you'll hear me on Sirius or Xfinity or one of the, Westwood one of the syndicators. Who knows? But that's the goal here, right here. And I'm taking all of you here, all the pioneers, let's call you, or the initial Patreon people. I'm going to take you with me to the top because you discovered me early on and you have faith in what I have to offer, and I appreciate that, and I will show you. I will just not just tell you that, but I'll show you how much, the degree to which I appreciate your attention, and because we're going we're going deep. We're going to come into some really good information. So that's enough preview. Pick up this book. I'll list this on the Patreon. I'll give a scan so you can look at. I don't think you can pick it up that well on camera, so you can pick it up on Amazon, and we'll have that. We'll try that out, see if it works. I wanted to thank ECAT, who also is a frequent live streamer here and watches this channel and is a Patreon supporter. I want to thank ECAT for specifically referring to a school for boys. I won't give the name of it because I haven't really checked into that particular school. It might be good, it might be bad, But I give them for the benefit of the doubt for now by not mentioning. But she talked about a school for boys where they were abducting most likely teenagers. And we're going to talk about the troubled teen industry today that we learned, at least I did. You might have known about it beforehand, but Paris Hilton taught me this whole idea that there was an industry out there. Anyway, ECAT said there's this school for boys out there where they come in the middle of the night and they abduct. I guess it technically can't be called kidnapping because typically the parents are there. They've signed the documents and the child is just taken away to one of these schools, right? It's called social learning education or social education learning, SEC for short, according to Paris Hilton, right? So that kind of sensitized me to, and it reminded me, it came to mind when I saw that documentary last week about Paris Hilton's experience. This is Paris. That's the name of the documentary. 2020 came out last year. You can find it on YouTube for free. So it clicked. I said, oh gosh. And then when I saw the documentary and she talked about it as being a troubled teen industry, I said, well, this is definitely something I need to check out. Why am I telling you this? Why am I revisiting Paris Hilton from it seems like ages ago, but Tuesday. Why am I revisiting that? Well, although I found Mr. Rogers himself to be squeaky clean, right? There's not a bit of dirt on his tennis shoes, and his cardigan he kept pretty well to himself, right? If you know what I'm alluding to. I will argue that Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and all that child-focused culture that began in the post-war period. It's known as the baby boom years, and I'm a baby boomer. All of that 1950, 60 cohort and beyond because Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood lasted till 2001. It went from 1968 to 2001. So they got the more recent millennials and post-millennials as well. But in particular, that show was geared for that 60s generation. I was already a teenager, so that's why I wasn't interested in Mr. Rogers. But anyway, that whole milieu that was being produced and engineered, really, culture and society are always being produced, and they don't happen randomly or arbitrarily. There are some organic expressions of it, but in our time, most of it, as you well know, is manufactured by large corporations. And it holds true for even so-called public television. The public broadcasting service, just because it has the word public in it, does not mean it does not have an ideological axe to grind. And its ideological axe to grind was the pacification of the American child, not through corporal punishment, because, as you know, that went out of style. And I guess it happens in the case of Paris Hilton. But for the most part, the society in general had rejected, you know what I mean by corporal punishment? Being hit by a cane or a stick or slapped or spanked. Or, when I was in junior high school, we would get swats all the time. The coach had a giant paddle in this office with little holes drilled in so that when he swatted you on the butt, the meat would come through and it would hurt even more. I got my share of swats as well. And they weren't really brutal. They were just, I don't know. I don't know if they could get away with it today, but certainly my parents didn't object because they grew up where corporal punishment for children was not unusual. And they didn't even call it corporal punishment. I think they just called it a spanking, right? And whatever your stand on it is, let's just be agnostic about it now, right? I personally don't believe in spanking or any type of corporal punishment, but that's a parent's prerogative, and that's really the point I want to make here today. What happened to parental guidance? What happened to parental training? What happened to the parents as the people who are chiefly responsible for inculcating ethics and moral values and shaping behavior? Well, part of the Mr. Rogers Neighborhood process was to remove the parent from that primary function, in addition to changing your diapers and earning a living to feed you and educate you. They were responsible for moral suasion and for ethical values, spiritual values as well. And we've seen, and we're here in 2021, where most of those functions have been now hijacked, abrogated by the state with a capital S and its band of professionals, professional experts, right? And I'm going to go in, not on Mr. Rogers, but I'm going to go in on this whole cadre of experts, this cult of expertise. And they're in the medical field, they're in education, they're in government, right? People who are of a old-time Americana bent, including myself. We're constantly rebelling and resisting these various forms of incorporation and oppression. We're not used. That's why they want to get rid of us, because they have a new generation who are just waiting in the wings to take over and enforce this new totalistic society. And they don't even realize that they're not going to be part of the picture as well, because the end game, as you already know, is a post-human society. So Greta Thunberg, as pathetic as she is an expression of this decades-long process that began, at least in the English-speaking world, with people like Fred Rogers. Not just I'm using Fred Rogers in quotation marks because there was a whole cadre of these education psychology experts behind Fred Rogers, and they're the ones that have taken over our institutions. Most of them are in schools of education. All right, I know people like to talk about celebrities on the media this and the media that, but you know what? larger than that, more comprehensive than that is the education establishment. Because where do these people come from? They come from Columbia Teachers College. They come from the Berkeley School of Education. They come from the UCLA School of Education. You name it, Harvard School of Education. In fact, Harvard School of Education seems to be very much invested in what Paris Hilton is trying to expose, which is this so-called social emotion learning, where these camps, which are re-education camps, have taken this literature, some of it good, some of it indifferent, most of it's bad, not bad in terms of morally bad, but just inconsequential, just garbage that people write so they can get promotions and tenure at the university. Inconsequential, that's what I mean in this case, bad. Because none of them are saying brutalize these kids and kidnap them in the middle of the night and do that. That's these schools that Paris Hilton had fallen into, right? Her and others, because as we're talking about it, it's an industry. And if I have some time, I'll share some literature that I was able to obtain in prepping for this talk. And if I don't get to it, I'll give it to the Patreons here. That's one of the benefits here. It's not you're just not just passively supporting me, but I'm sharing this source material so you can draw your own conclusions and do your own work. Yeah, we're going to dig into the female Illuminati. That's fascinating to me. I'm all over the place and I'm all on everything. So thank you very much. So ECAT, thank you for sensitizing me to this, and that made me. It brought me to a further understanding of our post-war oppression, starting in the 1950s, right? The baby boom. Now, Fred Rogers, and his dates are, he was born 1928, and he died in 2003. Gosh, he's been gone for quite a long while. I thought he died more recent. Well, there you go. Just like Johnny Carson, you just think he died yesterday, and it turns out he's been away from the scene a long time, right? And when this documentary came out titled "Won't You Be My Neighbor?" I was on that because Mr. Rogers has been a fascinating character to me for decades, and I was just waiting for a book or some kind of retrospective that explained Mr. Rogers in the full cultural light. Because I can only make assumptions and read these really flattering articles published in School of Education journals about how to bring Mr. Fred Rogers into teaching STEM courses, trivia like that. And believe me, these articles are pretty weak. Most of the literature in School of Education is awful. It's really terrible. I mean, from academic and scholarly standards, it's really terrible stuff. And the reason is that that's not really their business. Their real business is training a bunch of people in very weak theoretical grounding, this pseudo-psychology, pseudo-analytical framework, so they can go into public and private schools to create generations of semi-productive, semi-literate people. I'm not just saying that to be negative, but that's part. And you know this. You've read your Charlotte Iserby and these other people. I keep getting these messages. Or you should read so and so. I've read those already. I know that I'm giving you some new insights, right? Into the education process and the contribution that people like Fred Rogers and his handler, which I'll get to in a moment. Yes, behind every great Mr. Rogers, there's a greater female presence, just like you've got your Illuminati, who we thought were synonymous with men, right? It turns out there's women. Women are really the foundation of it. And it's one of those articles that Piper had sent me earlier, talks, and it's right on, is that this whole Oedipus complex stems from these real practices, ancient practices of mothers and sons teaming up together in incestuous relationships to overthrow the king so that they can have it, right? Usurpation, it's called. And we might see that unfolding right as we speak in various settings. And the reason I mention this is because before I end here, I'm going to talk about Uncle Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud, yes, the Sigmund Freud, and his not sexually incestuous relationship, but his emotional and intellectual incestuous and therapeutic relationship with his own daughter, Anna Freud, who in her own right became a well-respected psychoanalyst in the mold of her dear father, who she revered. And there's a whole story on it that Jeffrey Masson has written about. It's called Against Therapy, probably one of the better books on anti-Freudian, anti-therapeutic professional work that you can come across. Highly recommended. Anna Freud, right? They had this relationship. And this thread runs through this whole psychoanalytic, therapeutic post-war culture that was manifested in Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Yes, there's a reason why he came in off the street and changed into his cardigan and hanged it up really nicely and put his little tennis shoes on. By the way, back in 1968, grown men did not wear tennis shoes. That was for children. And grown men did not wear baseball caps. Grown men did not walk outside wearing shorts, right? I'm not an old, a moldy fig saying, oh yeah, I wish for the, no, I'm just saying that the way people presented themselves in the social setting was quite different than it is today, where anything goes. You can have a guy in his 50s who looks like he's a boarder, or he thinks he's a surfer or something. But that's their bag. That's whatever they want. You want to do or they want to do. I'm okay with it. I'm just saying that it was an anomaly, and that's kind of what kind of creeped me out about watching that intro day in and day out of Mr. Rogers. He's transforming. I think he's taking us through a ritualistic process, right? From the theme song to the end. And the end of the song is, what is it? I feel nice, something like that. Something about feeling and sensation, emotions, right? Yeah, the closing song of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, I have it written down here, is It's Such a Good Feeling. And I think he called himself Mr. McFeely. It's kind of creepy for someone who was a teenager and watching. I think my mother would make some snide remarks about him as well. We are all the kids in the household were not watching Mr. Rogers, so she could kind of poke fun of him. She's a very perceptive lady. And she could smell a phony and a fraud from a mile away. I think I get a lot of her insights and her sort of empathic understanding from my dear mother. So I should tell you that 68, I guess television was fairly well entrenched in American popular culture. I think by the late 50s, early 60s for sure. But there was still some debate about the negative effects of television, what it was doing to this generation of children. So Mr. Rogers was brought in to kind of blunt those criticisms. And that, by the way, that's why public television was put in there, not because the government or the Columbia Teachers College really cares about children as such. They just wanted the public off their back, saying, "Okay, we'll give you Petticoat Junction and Beverly Hillbillies and Jed Clampett. We'll give you all these garbage shows, but we'll also give you public television so that you can be enlightened." And people said, "Okay." By the way, public television, the biggest advocate of public television were the networks, CBS, ABC, and NBC. They loved it. Said, "Okay, yeah, do it." So that's how it operates. You're familiar with that technique, right? The controlled opposition. That's really where that was the seedbed of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. So by 1968, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was getting about 8 million children every day A lot of them were not in school yet. They were in preschool. A lot of them were just, in the younger grades. And that demographic remained the same, of course, but those numbers, I just checked them out up until 2000, up to the end of the show, 2020. I'm sorry, 2000, year 2000, they remained the same. And I said, there was no growth and it didn't diminish. No, it's because it was a really narrow segment that aged out and a new group would be replacing it. So that also told me that this is a perfect control group or controlled group that the social psychologists can study, that particular age where moral development and ethical development is supposedly being inculcated, and they can do a cohort study year by year. This is all, not all, but a lot of what we were experiencing or being shown on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was a behavioral science experiment. That was the control group, just like YouTube and iTunes. They're gathering data. You know the old saying by now. We are the product. We users, as they're called, are being used. We're the product, right? So television had the same approach to its audience. In addition to that, they were also selling us garbage in the commercials, except for public television, which supposedly is commercial free, even though they were being funded by all these wealthy family foundations in the back, and they were credited at the end, but they're still sponsors. So check out that documentary. You'll learn, this is where I came into the understanding that there was this whole social psychology mafia behind Fred Rogers. It came out of academia, right? And this is the type of research, quote unquote, that migrates into these schools of education, including the Columbia Teachers College, right? So let me, and because I'm running out of time here, let me, for now, skip over the troubled teen industry. I'll get back into that. You already know what that is anyway, but you do not know who the godmother of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood is. If you do, or if you do know, you're one up on me, or you're ahead of me right here. I didn't find out about her until 2020 when I started researching in depth Mr. Rogers, thanks to this documentary. I started going in and looking at the academic literature, and I found out that there was I guess she's a psychologist by training. Her name is Margaret B. McFarland, Ph.D., Professor McFarland. I think she spent most of her career at the University of Pittsburgh. And as you might imagine, her expertise was in early childhood development, child psychology. And she was undergoing her professional training, her master's, her doctorate work. And by the way, the reason I've been mentioning Columbia Teachers College, she got her PhD at Columbia, right? So it's all of a piece there. And the children's workshop and a lot of children's programming, I think, was devised in New York City. I don't know where Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was produced. I don't know if it was New York or not. It could have been anywhere. It could have been I don't think it was in Los Angeles. I think it was back east somewhere. It might have been Pennsylvania. You can find that out. But the point is, it's supposed to be Main Street, USA, America, right, Mr. Rock? It could be anywhere, USA. But New York, which is the home, even today, of the advertising agency, which is the persuasion and propaganda industry, and social research, all of that is very much centered in New York City. So that's where it has its roots, in the person of Dr. Margaret B. McFarland. Now, at the University of Pittsburgh, she founded what's called the Arsenal, ARS. That's an appropriate word. Isn't an arsenal where you store ordnance and bombs and bullets? Maybe they were these mine bullets that she was storing up here at the Arsenal Family and Children's Center. That's the title of it, Arsenal Family and Children's Center at the University of Pittsburgh. And she founded it back in 1953. My gosh. I was only a gleam in my parents' eye or my father's eye. Maybe I was born, but I was not I was an infant if I was born. So she was at it a long time. And she's part of this cohort, this post-war cohort that were very interested in figuring out how to control the civilian population. For one thing, you had millions of young men coming back into the workforce after World War II. And this, by the way, is when the GI Bill of Rights came into being, and they provided for higher education funding for a lot of these men who never would have been able to go to school, and VA housing, low interest mortgage. That's how my parents were able to buy a house. My father's a veteran; he got all those benefits. So they're trying to figure out how to get these adults readjusted. But they were already socialized in an earlier age. They're already formed. They came up in the 1920s and the Great Depression. I mean, their childhood was very, very, unless of course they were part of the Great Gatsby crowd, right? The white shoe boys. But most Americans were suffering through that. So they were formed. But us, the post-war generation, we were tabula rasa. We were blank slates. And the social scientists and the people who were going to sell us canned goods and TV dinners and bicycles and Barbie dolls, they really wanted to have a grip on our consciousness, our imagination. They wanted to mold us in the proper direction. Now, of course, Margaret B. McFarland or Fred Rogers, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, even though that typically comes back and bites me in the rear end. But I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, they might not have been cynically inclined in the way that advertisers are, right? The people that created such abominations as Kellogg's sugar, frosted crack, whatever it is, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. But they used her research. They used the teachers' college, the doctoral programs, the graduate programs all over the country in order to get into the heads of the post-war generation. So not only is someone like me a product of the television generation, and it's continuous, so television and psychological control, social psychology. Sometimes it's called mind control, right? But it's more subtle than that, right? I don't think I was given any sort of Ewan Cameron type of psychic driving regime, but I was given television, which is a mild version of that, perhaps, right? So Margaret McFarland, people like her, understood this potential of this television technology, right? The flicker rate, all of it, it. But they tried to present it in a more benign fashion that they could create or inculcate in people such as myself a more benign, friendly, kind of social identity, one that's amenable to working in groups. Actually, it's really the type of social psychology that's perfectly fit for being a corporate drone, right? You respect the man in the cardigan, and the manager himself is undergoing training. He's got to learn how to be more friendly, right? Management training. That's what I gave a talk earlier on Werner Erhard and Est, right? That's all about management training. That was also going on at the same time where we kiddies were being inculcated in a certain type of social psychology that was perfectly suited to the growth period in the American economy, the corporate white-collar economy. There were books, novels satirizing it, critical of it, praising it, right? The man in the gray flannel suit, all of that stuff. Today, of course, it's all post-humanism, but we're talking about the 1950s, right? And maybe that's why there was no replacement for Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. They figured it outlived its time, and it probably had, so far as the New World Order handlers are concerned. So Margaret B. McFarland, she ran in rarefied intellectual circles, let's say. She herself, her work was weak, I know, because I have read a lot of it. And that tells me that she was educated in a kinder, gentler, pre-Freudian tradition of psychology. She was more like a kindergarten teacher with an advanced degree. She was more interested in childcare. I'm not putting her down for that. I'm just saying that she was not the type of psychology or cognitive science that you see today. Some of it bad and also unethical and far more malevolent than Margaret McFarlane and her peers could ever come up with. I mean, gosh, she was part of a much kinder and gentler age, I'd have to say, but she still laid the groundwork for what was later to follow. So, who were at least two of the members of this rarefied intellectual circle? One was Benjamin Spock, Spock. Yes, as in Mr. Spock. Mr. Spock was named after Benjamin Spock because Mr. Spock in Star Trek was this kindly, gentle. He had these preternatural powers, of course, because he was an alien, but he was a superhuman, right? And that was an homage to either Arch or not, or flattering. I don't know. That was, maybe it was Gene Roddenberry. It's probably one of Gene Roddenberry's handlers. Maybe it was the same psychologist that were controlling Fred Rogers as was controlling Gene Roddenberry. We don't know. That'd be an interesting connection if that turned out to be true. So Benjamin Spock was a medical doctor. He was a pediatrician. And for those of you who don't know or do know, if you're my age, his best-selling book was in the household of every single anxious parent. And that was everybody in the post-war period, because this was the time when the psychology profession really made its move on American society. This is where they said, you need us. You need our expertise in order to rear your children. I mean, that's an unfortunate choice of words. To raise your children, socialize your children, you need to read Dr. Spock's Baby and Child Care, which, ladies and gentlemen, today is in its 9th edition. It has never gone out of print. It's a perennial. It's a franchise. Dr. Spock died, in 1998, right? He lived to the ripe old age of 93, 94, something like that. But almost every household read it. In fact, it was so pervasive that when Dr. Spock came out against the Vietnam War, and I have to give him credit for this, there's no benefit of the doubt here. He was out there on the front lines, putting his body out there as a anti-war protester. And a lot of conservatives, war hawks, people like Anita Bryant, who I never liked, and Phyllis Schlafly, right? Ugh, right? Chicken hawk, right? Send the underclass boys and the people from Appalachia, send them over to Vietnam, and kill those people, and make America safe for General Motors or the Ford Corporation or Bell Helicopters. So a lot of these conservatives blame Dr. Spock for the love generation, for the counterculture, because supposedly his psychology, and there was a lot of psychology in Dr. Spock that Margaret McFarlane put in her work. It also found its way into the affect, the behavior of Mr. Rogers, Mr. Fred Rogers. So he was blamed as well as praised at the same. That's Benjamin Spock, for those of you who don't know. And the second person, he's a name that's probably less known, but nonetheless, he was hugely popular when I was in college. His name's Erik Erikson, E-R-I-K, it's spelled. His books are still in print, and he also lived to a ripe old age. I think he predeceased Dr. Spock by only 2 or 3 years. He was also in his 90s. And his particular area was youth, child psychology, mostly sort of older adult up into the 20s. He saw this as a transitional moment for most people in human development, and he universalized that model. I think it was uniquely characteristic of, let's say, the post-war America, maybe Britain, some other society, but it was perfect for America, for the U.S. society, where you had for the first time, a generation of young people of that demographic who had their own money to spend. They had an allowance. They got 50 cents a week or a quarter. I mean, how do you think David and Ricky were able to go to the malt shop, and buy Mary Ellen Rogers a hamburger and puts nickels into the jukebox? I mean, the previous generation, they came out of the Depression. There was no disposable income. Some of the better off kids, even when I was going to high school, they had their own cars. They had their own automobiles, right? So this is a uniquely American generation due to the hyper-productive economy of the American 1950s. So Erickson wrote and universalized falsely, I believe, a series of books talking about how youth rebellion is understandable. All young people go through this is where that phrase comes from, by the way, Eric Erickson. They all go through an identity crisis, right? Where we figure, oh, what am I doing here? What is my place in the cosmos? Who am I? All these questions that they're not new to the 1950s and 60s generation. I think you can probably see those questions asked over and over again in the Bible, for example, in all sorts of literature, that profound literature, whether it's sacred or fiction, right? It's that those questions are asked in V.C. Andrews. Not that she's the best representative of literary tradition. Or let's say, the Bronte sisters, right? Identity crisis is an existential it's a part of human development, if I can use one of their terms. So there you go, Spock, Erickson, that filtered into the work that McFarlane in turn passed on to Fred Rogers, and that went into the behavior, the affect, as well as the values that were. And I don't have any problem with them. It was a nice, gentle type of universe and world that was being presented. Never mind the fact that that show came out at the peak of a genocide going on in Southeast Asia. We talk about George Hodel, Dr. Hodel. He was over there doing this. This is the milieu where people like Ted Shackley, right? The blonde ghost, the Dulles brothers, they were overseas and, killing hundreds of thousands of civilians overtly and covertly. This was the kinder, gentler universe that Mr. Rogers' neighborhood was operating in. The Vietnam War really didn't end for us in America until 1975, and he had been on the air for quite a long while. So there was a what they call cognitive dissonance. We had these wars overseas and at home. This is a civil rights revolution taking place here. Cities burning, and at the same time you had this sort of island of security called Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. And I was already a teenager and thinking critically, and that's probably the main reason why I rejected and thought it was phony. Because at bottom it was out of sync with political realities. All right. Let me give you a quick examples of what Dr. McFarlane was into. Mothering, research on mothering activities back in 1957. Remember Dr. Spock, right there? Supposedly motherhood had not existed prior to the 1950s, right? I mean, humanity, we'd already been around for, 20,000 years in our current manifestation. Mothering is something that people did out of survival. But all of a sudden, we had these experts that were telling us that how mothering should take place. And she did a lot of social science research, qualitative, let's call it. She published in a journal, 1955. I was a tot myself. She published in a publication, the National Association for Nursery Education. Nursery schools, we're talking about pre-kindergarten, right? We're talking about 4 or 5, and that's the demographic for Fred Rogers. And by the way, if you don't know this, Fred Rogers was an ordained priest. His first choice of profession was the priesthood. And he wanted, the legend goes, according to the documentary film that I already mentioned, the legend goes that he wanted to serve the community and have a ministry that was child-focused because he had a certain sensitivity to children and their fears, such as fear of abandonment, death, and injury, and divorce wasn't prevalent back then. But if something rare such as divorce took place, and cancer was rare, both divorce and cancer were spoken in my household in whispered terms because it was seen as some sort of rarity. But now it's prevalent in just in a couple of generations. But so they were gearing up for this, I think. The social scientists, the helping professions, not just schools of education, but schools of of social work. We're gearing up for this new world order, state-run medical educational tyranny, corporate tyranny that we see today in 2021. So no matter how we might feel this warm, fuzzy sensation about Fred Rogers, I think we're going to have to reevaluate at a radical level the infrastructure, the emotional infrastructure that he set us up for, right? He lures us in through this kinder, gentler world of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, even though there's a genocidal war going on in Southeast Asia and other parts of the world, because the U.S. was busy subverting governments and killing people all over in the Congo, Indonesia, on and on and on. You know the career of Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger was the head hidden hand, the dark hand, right? During the peak of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and he's still the hidden hand today in 2021. Mr. Rogers went all the way through that. That's what these academic articles do not want to recognize. That's why I'm giving this talk to you, so that we can figure out how to overcome if we were baby boomers, we can overcome this form of social psychology programming. And for those who came afterwards, the millennials, for those of you who are that generation, you can also perhaps recognize the harm that something like Teletubbies has been has put into play in the society, or any other, pick your poison, whatever show you want to talk about. So I have 10 minutes here, so let me delve deeply into more deeply, because it's going to be superficial, into what I alluded to earlier about this incestuous, at least intellectually and therapeutic, relationship between Sigmund Freud and his daughter, Anna Freud. And I mention it because Dr. McFarlane herself was I won't say a fan, but she was familiar, because, Sigmund Freud died. His daughter was fairly active when McFarlane, they were contemporaries. Anna Freud was a little bit older, but she was alive when McFarlane was doing her graduate training, and she was doing her writing. Anna Freuders, who was also a psychologist, right? So McFarlane pays homage to Anna Freud in her publications. What is it called? It says, on the research side, this is a review by Dr. McFarlane, Professor Margaret B. McFarlane, a discussion of an experiment in group upbringing. Notice that title, An Experiment in Group Upbringing, which was an article or a book, I haven't read it, by Anna Freud with one of her collaborators. And notice here, group upbringing. Yes, why would that be of interest to Professor McFarlane and the social psychologist? Well, the post-war push up until the present was to do away with this notion of individual autonomy. Some people call it communism, but I think that's just sort of a blanket term. You'll hear that on, conservative me. Oh yeah, it's communism, right? Which means nothing. It's just another label. But there was a conscious attempt in order to foreground the group, to foreground a larger collectivity. And if you want to call it communism, socialism, be my guest. But it goes deeper than that. It's really a collectivity, a group think, a group mind, group consciousness, which is perfectly suited to the technocracy, which transcends communism or capitalism, because you have communist regimes that are highly technocratic. Soviet Union, very much involved with futuristic technologies, right? So it's not a matter of communism and versus capitalism. It's about totalism. It's about groupthink. It's about the aggregate, so that everything operates on this algorithm of this artificial algorithm of consensus group, and it's all fabricated. It is all engineered to suit the corporatocracy, right? So she's interested in this. They have to figure out through the children how to bring about this corporatocracy, this mind meld, this group, and this group consciousness. And one of the as I stated at the outset, one of the strategies was to remove the parents from the child. And if physically, if you needed to do that, in extreme cases, you're sending them to these social emotive learning centers, right, that Paris Hilton told us about, then maybe we have to do that. Maybe it doesn't have to be extreme as that, but it's on a continuum. You're making the school, you're allowing the school and the schools of education, the schools of social work, these cults of experts to train children. And that's where they have us today, ladies and gentlemen, 2021. If we really definitively want to break the chokehold of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and all the other foundations, then we're going to have to start at a more fundamental level, which means more work for us. And we're going to have to take responsibility for education, for moral education, for ethic inculcation. And we're going to have to make time, create time to not only contest the fake expertise and authority of these so-called experts, and we'll have to retake it and assume it for ourselves and rejoin previous generations. It skipped a couple generations, but I think we still have enough memory, and we have this literature, and hopefully this talk will help us, that I'm presenting today will help us remind, let's say, our heritage of autonomy and Americana, and show how through seemingly innocuous shows on so-called PBS, like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, how that autonomy was slowly taken away from us and handed over to the corporatocracy, to the national institutes of whatever, to the through these unions, through the lobbies. Who are the people that are refusing to open up society, even though we've seen all the literature, including from well-recognized experts themselves, saying the lockdown should be over, right? Who's the main group? It's the teachers' unions. They are holding a whole generation of children hostage to their will to power, if you want to use the Nietzschean phrase, right? That comes out of the Columbia Teachers College. It comes out of the School of Education, UCLA, School of Education, Berkeley, Harvard Graduate School of Education, GSE, all of these institutions. This is where we have to really dig in. Yeah, the military industrial everybody knows about that. But for some reason, well, I know the reasons why, the education establishment gets a pass on that. Okay, to conclude then, let me see here. Well, I won't get into some of the creepy. I'll post it on the Patreon. I'm going to post this article that was published in the Journal of Religion and Health, 2001. This is about 10 years old. Anna Freud's analysis by her father, The Assault on the Self. I want you to read that. It'll give you a whole different perspective. If you're don't already know the critique, it'll give you a different perspective on Freudianism. It'll give you a more critical insight into these psychology experts. Dr. Phil? Oh my God, yeah, there's another talk. That's so easy though, because everybody knows who Dr. Phil is, and you know he's a phony. You know he's a creation of the goddess, right? Oprah Winfrey, right? He bailed her out because he was an expert in psychology when she was being sued by the meat industry lobby because, oh yeah, eating meat is just terrible. And there was a lawsuit, and Dr. Phil was supposed to be out, and she found out that, hey, he's got a pretty good scam going on here. He's pretending that he has some sort of answers about human behavior, and he calls himself Dr. Phil, and they made a show out of it, right? So that was too easy. That's, let someone else on YouTube handle that. I don't need to go on Dr. Phil, but go into him. But I will go into to Dr. Seuss, as I've had, and I'll go in on Dr. Margaret B. McFarland. That's a name that you will know hereafter, right? In this process of dismantling this cult of expertise, right? Okay, so that wraps it up. Watch Mr. Rogers, then watch the documentary. It's a good one. It's done by some guy who is, I won't go into his credits, but he's done quite a number of really slick documentaries. He doesn't know any of this background, or maybe he does, and he's just too slick to report on it. But you have it now. You can look at Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood in an altogether new light. But more important, than even Mr. Fred Rogers, even more important than Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. You are gaining insights to how these celebrities, and Mr. Rogers would have to count as a celebrity. He might reject the title, but he's influential. He's important. You know, we're looking at Paris Hilton. We're looking at Tony Bow. We're looking at Joan Rivers. And we're seeing the fabricated nature of them, which everybody knows, right? So, oh, yeah, I know that. Yeah. No, you need specifics. You need to figure out, I need to know how specifically these people are brought to the front and how their agenda is executed on a very, very subtle level, to the point where, you know, if I allude to someone called Mr. Creepy, and by the way, it's just Mr. Creepy, you can draw your own conclusion who I'm referring to, right? It doesn't have to be Fred Rogers. There's all kinds of creepy people out there, right, who look like him or behave like him. So I'll leave that to your imagination. Let's develop some more. We've made a lot of progress in the last year and a half. That's one of the good outcomes of this pandemic. But we made a lot of progress on looking more realistically at the people who have taken on the authority of helpers, right? Again, we call it the cult of expertise. I didn't coin that phrase. This phrase first came out during the Vietnam War, where all these people like Robert McNamara, who comes out of the Ford Corporation, all these statisticians, right? These people who are who figured out how to make mass produce automobiles. Well, they figured out how to mass produce misery and death, right? That's where this notion of the cult of expertise came about. And I see where it's frustrating. I see we're still under the thrall of this cult of expertise in 2021. We'll know that there's a fracture in the cult of expertise once certain people, who I will not name here, once they start getting indicted and prosecuted for their crimes against humanity. And with that bright note, I will wish you a wonderful day in the neighborhood. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'll see you in an hour in my favorite show, the Thursday Trio. Thank you for joining me today. Bye.